We have Nicole Mills. If you guys haven't met Nicole, she's been a long time SCRS supporter, formerly with Medics. You may have seen her speak on an SCRS program prior to today, or maybe at ACRP. She does a lot of work with ACRP as well. But Nicole is our new education and knowledge management lead. So for those of you who are working with us on workshops or webcasts or upcoming summit activity, you'll be working with Nicole here in the near term. So welcome, Nicole, and thanks for leading us today on this Sites Now. And then we also have Mr. David Volcano. He is our Vice President of Research, Compliance, and Integrity at HCA Healthcare. He is also the honorary SCRS President and a recipient of the prestigious Christine Pierre Award for Outstanding Volunteer Leadership and Advocacy. Welcome, David. You probably have seen him on a variety of SCRS webcasts, or maybe most recently at our Australia, New Zealand Summit in Melbourne, where he was presenting our landscape. So welcome, David, as well. If you're new to Sites Now was born out of necessity during the pandemic. We wanted a place to share with members and industry partners and talk a little bit about what was happening at the site level. Topics range every single month, from budgets and contracts to patient engagement and the like. These are our Sites Now 2022 supporters. We're Sites Now kind of like starts and ends at weird times in the year, but we're renewing right now for our 2023 program. We will be making some cool changes as we approach 2023. And we are grateful for the organizations listed. Many of you are here today. Thank you so much. Hey, have you checked out the Sites Now resources? We got all kinds of categories we work on, but I would ask my colleagues if you could share with the audience in the chat. And everybody, go ahead and open that chat if you don't mind. Let us know where you're dialing in from today. So I'm just going to let you know that I'm here in beautiful Towson, Maryland. But I'm asking my colleagues if you could share the link over to everyone on how they can find all of the previous Sites Now materials, our recordings, sometimes we come out with infographics and posts. Great, welcome everyone. Green Bay, Winter Garden, Phoenix and Austin and Bedford. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. After today's session, we like to share that information. It'll be coming to you in a follow-up, but then also posted online on our website. And that's what I'm hoping we can share with you here in the chat. It's hard to believe it, but in a little under 3 months, we will be celebrating our 10th anniversary in Hollywood, Florida at our Global Site Solutions Summit. You can register for the summit. We expect amazing numbers. We've really been fortunate. We've had 3 summits so far this year: diversity, oncology, Australia, New Zealand, and now we're setting our sights on the Global Site Solutions Summit. So we are looking at likely over 1,200 attendees. We're completely sold out of exhibit space. And most of our sponsorships. We do have a couple of alignment sponsorships available for organizations that are looking to attend and support SCRS a little bit differently. Please reach out to Marcus or Kareem for more information on that. But this year, we'll be talking about what 10 years has done to advance site success, where we're headed over the next 10 years too. So we really hope that you guys could join us real soon in Hollywood, Florida. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Fred Nicole, to take us away. We're talking about solving workforce together today. So, Nicole, how do we get started?
All right. Thank you, everyone. Love the opportunity to speak with SCRS. Always, Sites Now is one of my favorites. And so I'm excited to talk with you guys today a little bit about the workforce landscape. I think It's a good place to start when we consider the challenges in the workforce that we've all kind of heard. A good place to know is a pulse on what the actual workforce looks like in clinical research right now. So I think just in general, we all tend to love data when we're in the clinical research area. And so what I'm going to be sharing today is a lot of statistics and data on the current state of the workforce as of June and July 2022. So it's as recent as we can possibly get when it comes to data on jobs that are being posted, who's posting jobs, what people are looking for, skill sets, and then also kind of posing some questions and some challenges that you guys might have already heard, but things that I would love for us to be able to discuss today in groups and possibly come up with some solutions for. So to start, there's still a shortage of experienced clinical research talent, right? So there's 6.6 million jobs posted right now in relation to clinical research and 5.7 million available hires. And this is all data based off of CareerBuilder. So there's more, I'm sure, even within other platforms. But what that means is there's almost 1 million more jobs available than talent available nationwide. So when we hear that there's a workforce shortage in clinical research being a significant industry issue, this is why. There's more jobs than are people able to fill them. And we'll kind of go into a little bit more detail about what kind of level of talent people are looking for, what level of experience, education, expertise, skill sets, because there's a lot that goes into those kind of hires and being able to find people to work. Just some general information: for every one job posted, for every one CRC looking for a job, there's 7 jobs posted. For nurses, it's a 1-to-10 ratio, and for regulatory affairs, it's 1 in 35. So if you are having challenges hiring or looking, this might be why. This obviously varies city and state. This is just some nationwide data just to give you a very round ratio, but overall, the unemployment rate in the US used to be 1.5% pre-pandemic, and now it's 3.8%, which means that even outside of clinical research and even outside of healthcare, there's still more jobs available, more talent available looking for jobs, but there's still more jobs than unemployed professionals. So there's a lot of people out there who are looking, but there's still a lot more jobs in general out there. So I pulled some supply and demand data. If you live in, I noticed there's some people from Florida, a couple people from California, Texas. So this will apply to you directly, but I picked a few states with high number of clinical trial sites. And so it showed some supply and demand data for clinical research coordinators. As Florida, you can see the demand is pretty high for people looking for jobs, number of jobs posted. There's 5,000 jobs posted, and there's about 878 people looking for jobs right now. You can see it kind of varies city by city. Georgia, California is the worst. If you are in California and you are looking to hire, you're going to have a little bit of a challenge right now with 13,000 jobs posted and about 1,400 people who are actively looking for jobs right now. So this means that sites are having to get really creative when it comes to hiring, whether that be salary adjustments, offering incentives for people to come work for them, different types of perks. A lot of times there's hybrid scheduling or remote work that they're having to offer now because of the change in the workforce landscape post-pandemic. So there's just a lot going on here, but depending on what state you live in, there's a little bit more or less challenges, but this kind of gives you an idea of if you're having specific challenges in one of these states in particular, this might be why. So what are sites looking for? So just this month alone, there were 62,000 new job postings for clinical research, of which 17,000 of them were unique. And when I say unique, what I mean is they don't fit the typical clinical research coordinator type of role, which means companies are creating new job titles and diversifying traditional roles of clinical research coordinators. So you might be seeing this within your own organization. There's new roles in IT, compliance, regulatory, data management, different job titles that don't fit the mold of traditional roles that we're used to seeing. Now, the top posted job titles are still clinical research coordinators, clinical project managers, research nurses. Oncology obviously has its own category. But new technology changes in the way that we do research is leading to new types of roles. So we're starting to hear a lot more about decentralized trials and coordinators that suit those type of roles, home health nurses. So there's a lot with the changes in the type of trials that are being conducted and the way that the protocols are being written. There's a lot of changes in the types of jobs that people are looking to fill as well. People are starting to get creative in finding new roles and diversifying things to try to find additional talent, just because the talent pool is so low right now. So top cities that are posting jobs, you can see Philadelphia, Boston, New York. The cost of living is high in these places. So this is a little bit of information just kind of explaining why sometimes these places are posting more jobs than other situations, is that the cost of living is a factor, inflation, and salaries haven't always kept up in these locations, or just in general in the clinical research space. I have some data moving on that shows kind of the average salary, and we'll kind of go over that and how that plays into factors as well. But also, if you look at this on the East Coast, this Northeast area itself has a lot of academic institutions as sites, which traditionally have lower pay. And then there's also lots of sponsors and CROs in that area who are happy to take on anybody with clinical research experience who might be coming from those sites, and oftentimes offering higher pay rate than they were making at the academic institution. So competition is really high in a lot of these areas. There's oftentimes a lot of turnover, which makes it difficult for programs to advance when they're having high turnover. So people with less experience are being hired by sponsors and CROs. And then the academic sites are oftentimes looking for people who have any kind of experience to come in and work at the different programs. So there's some unique challenges when you look at a lot of these different places, but there's a lot of job postings. I mean, 1,600 job postings in June alone, just in Philadelphia, over 2,000 in Boston. So if you're anybody working in the clinical research space and living in any of those areas, you're, have your choice of jobs if you have any kind of experience. But I think one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is that there's a lot of people who don't have a lot of experience in clinical research who are looking for jobs, and they're struggling to find positions, and people are not hiring less experienced talent. And we'll see that also. I have a slide that kind of shows a little bit about what the top sought after talent is, education and experience wise. So the top companies posting, you can see academic centers. There's a couple of sponsors, CROs, and staffing agencies. So sponsors, CROs are offering signing bonuses and perks that sites just honestly can't compete with. And so it's making it a challenge. I think everybody is experiencing that, and it's just a natural progression within the clinical research space of people moving from sites over to sponsors and CROs. Sometimes they come back over to sites, depending on what you're looking for. But that's something that we're experiencing and that we're seeing in the industry right now, is just a massive migration of clinical research talent over to sponsors and CROs, just because the need is high across the board at all of the different organizations. And so that in a way that's causing everyone to adjust their expectations when it comes to hiring. So when it comes to the skills that people are looking for, so these are skills that are listed in typical job postings. Clinical research obviously is going to be the top skill that they're looking for. Clinical trials, obviously, in over 50%, they're looking for clinical trial experience. But I thought it was interesting that, IRB experience, good clinical came before good clinical practice, data collection, auditing, pharmaceuticals, oncology, data management. Those are all top skills that people are looking for when they're posting positions, and they're hitting close to 20% or more on new job postings. And so I think that this falls a little bit within what I was expecting when I was posting for positions and looking for people to hire. In the clinical research landscape, I was willing to take people who had clinical research experience over anything else. I think when I worked at Medix, one of the top things we were asking clients was, do you prefer have research experience or therapeutic area experience? And that was what we were asking our clients all the time. And oftentimes they would say, I would rather have clinical research experience. I can teach the therapeutic area experience. I'm curious if your thoughts are the same, if that's what you kind of a rule of thumb when you hire, because obviously the magical unicorn that has both clinical research and the therapeutic area area experience you're looking for is a very rare find. So if you find somebody with that, you obviously want to snatch them up right away. But clinical research and clinical trial experience is paramount, just because it's a little bit harder to train in the intricacies of clinical research. Clinical research coordination even comes less than that. Like, you don't even necessarily have to the clinical research coordination experience, but just exposure to clinical trials and clinical research is important. And anything after that, GCP, data collection, specific areas within pharmaceuticals or oncology, data management, all of those come secondary to clinical trial and clinical research experience.
Hey, Nicole, before we move on, I was just curious if there was an industry outside of research, outside of even medicine, perhaps, that folks have found has a regular sort of audience of qualified people that have transferable skills that they could put to use in research. This is a topic we've explored very, very shallowly over the last 2 years. And I was just curious if the folks on the phone, I love this slide that you have because it kind of shows what people, our folks value. And I'm wondering if they're finding other qualities from other industries that are serving them well in their hiring.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that that was part of what we were looking for, you know, having a staffing background experience myself. I mean, we had to get creative when finding different solutions for people to enter into the clinical research workforce, as does everyone else right now. So you're constantly trying to find areas and types of jobs or people with different positions where the skills might be transferable or that they might be really successful in the clinical research space. I know there's obviously types of personalities that fit best within the clinical research arena, you know, obviously attention to detail. We all know sort of the clinical research DNA, if you want to say that, of people who are successful in the research space. But I mean, I think there's a lot of different positions outside of research that would be really great to consider. And I'm sure other people, like you said on the call, have had stories of their own of good hires that they've had have come from areas outside. I know, recruiters tend to do really well in the clinical research space just because they're familiar with getting on the phone, talking to patients, usually, people focused. We obviously have good experience hiring people who have healthcare backgrounds. So anybody who is, again, patient facing, used to working in that type of environment is always a good fit, and training in the clinical research space. But I think we just overall in general in clinical research have a workforce problem of just how do we get these people who want to get into clinical research into positions at the sites when the sites already have a massive burden then of training and onboarding, and they don't necessarily have the resources to be able to do that all the time. And that's why they're looking for those people who have that 2 to 3 years of experience, or maybe a little bit less, just so that the burden of training and isn't as massive as it would be with somebody who's coming in with a little bit of experience. And so I think the bigger question is, how do we alleviate some of the training issues for sites and make it a little bit easier for them to hire people who have less experience or who come from other industries to transition them into being clinical research coordinators to kind of help with the burden of the workforce issue that we're having right now. But I am so excited today to talk to everyone to see what people's thoughts are on how we might be able to do this as an industry, because it is, something that is being talked about really frequently.
I had a dinner a couple months ago with some of the ACRO board members, and ACRO was celebrating a big anniversary. It's the Association of Clinical Research Organizations, basically. And the table was filled with CROs leads, and they were sharing that project management was one of the most critical sort of experience driven factors that they look for in other markets, other industries like aerospace, like even people with just project management experience elsewhere that they can learn life science. I think this is a fascinating topic. I'm always interested because I know it's going to be different for our sites than our industry peers, but it's a really, like you said, it's something we'll dive into in the breakouts. And I see Michelle shared, for in her world for cardiology, you know, having a therapeutic training is important, and then teach them research from there. Maria Elena talked about just having medical assistant experience and some sort of, you know, note taking and scribe work. And you know, Mary's asking, you know, what about some of the newer roles? And I think you mentioned patient recruitment being such a big one. Are you seeing sort of this digital trend for folks with digital experience at the site level too?
Yeah, especially as decentralized trials start to become more of a forefront at the organizations, and with all of the different technology that's available for patients, they're looking for people who have that digital or IT or some kind of experience working with different technology. And there's a slide I have coming up, actually, I think it's the next one, talking about what people are hiring for when it comes to platforms or different technology use. And so the new type of roles that we're seeing that are being developed or that we're being asked to hire for, or look for, are definitely a lot more technology focused, just given the new state of clinical research and how trials are being conducted. People are getting really creative. You're going to see a lot of people who on their resumes are going to have unique positions that you haven't seen before. And then you're going to have to really dive in and not base things off of job titles, but actual job descriptions of what they were doing. Because a lot of, you know, I think that that's a misconception. Job titles equating to the same type of, you know, skills across the board. Job titles do not equate to skills particularly. And so it's really diving into actual backgrounds and what people are doing on the day-to-day that'll help you hire better. So actually that next slide, the top software skills that people are asking for in job postings is obviously Microsoft Office and Excel are kind of top ones, but any kind of eClinical is actually next, which surprised me quite a bit. It doesn't have a high frequency, but it does in profiles. So people are not necessarily saying that they have eClinical background in their profiles when they're looking to hire, but jobs are asking for it in job postings. Which I think is really fascinating, because why wouldn't you advertise if you were looking for a job that you have eClinical background, but people are looking for it. And that's actually the third thing over Microsoft PowerPoint or even over EDC, is having experience in eClinical Works.
Nicole, when you say eClinical Works, are you talking about the specific EMR company eClinical Works? Or are you talking about electronic clinical or EMRs in general?
I think this one is electronic, just electronic clinical, not eClinical Works itself.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Like e-regulatory, e-consent, you know, different types of eClinical background and having experience working in these type of fields.
Yeah, because there's that EMR company eClinical Works that's spelled the same way, ECW. That may be confusing in there.
Yeah, I can't imagine that people would be over 5% of jobs posting would be asking for that particular company, but it, you know, I would actually have to look into that. So let me double check on that one. But I'm imagining that, I mean, I hope, I guess, that it would be more eClinical backgrounds and having experience working in those kind of fields. But thank you for clarifying, and I'll look into that actually.
It would be interesting to see how many folks are putting DCT, you know, experience in the profiles and their job postings, you know, too. I think that might be a great question for us to begin to ask in some of our workforce work as well.
Absolutely. Electronic data capture is obviously super important. It's something that's done on a day-to-day basis. And then I think some of the programming stuff doesn't necessarily apply. It's interesting that they have that on here. You know, some of the, obviously Microsoft Word at the bottom, but I'm not sure about some of these other programs, because I haven't had anybody I know that's had to use programming in the clinical research space, but I obviously haven't worked all over in every single position. So it's possible that these might be important in other areas. But I did think that the eClinical and the electronic data capture obviously are important. A lot of people have Microsoft Office and Excel. But these are just kind of different trends that we're noticing of just changes in what's being posted and what people are advertising for in their job when they're looking for different jobs. All right, so this is, actually find this really interesting. So when it comes to education and experience breakdown of the positions that were posted, so of those 62,000 positions that were posted, about 39% of them, or 6,900, well, actually it would be less than that, are listing no experience. And it doesn't necessarily mean that no experience is needed. They just don't have the experience listed in the job postings. And so same thing with no education listed. It doesn't mean that it's not required. It just wasn't listed in the job posting. But as you can see, bachelor's degree is still the highest when it comes to education level that's being sought out for different job descriptions. High school or GED is about 5%, associate's degree 10%, and it jumps up to bachelor's degree 53% and master's degree 21%, PhD or higher, depending on what type of facility it might be important, but they have that at 30%. So it's really pretty consistent across the board. That bachelor's degree are obviously preferred, but there is some fluctuation in the type of education experience that is required. And then when you look at years of experience, that 2 to 3 years is kind of the sweet spot. So 0 to 1 year is only 9%. So that's pretty small percent of people who are looking for like almost no experience or up to that 1 year. That 2 to 3 year is exactly kind of where people are looking for the most part. And then 4 to 6 years, it jumps up a little bit. And then beyond that 7 to 9 or 10 plus, it kind of drops down again. It's just salary wise. I mean, we all know kind of the reasons, but it's that 2 to 3 years that is always the most requested. And that's just because people come in with a little bit of experience. They know what they're doing. They're not necessarily, the training burden isn't there for the sites, and that they're easily transitioned into different roles. And so that 4 to 6 years and that 2 to 3 years is the most sought after experience level when it comes to clinical research coordinators. And along with that goes the advertised salary. So it's important to note here that only 2,400 of the jobs that were posted actually listed salaries. Most of them did not. But of those that were posted, 82,000 was the average salary. And you can kind of see the breakdown here. Some of them range anywhere from 40,000 up to 120,000 or more. I want to also mention that, just remember the locations as well that we're posting the most jobs. Like I said, most of them were in the Northeast where salaries are a little bit higher. So it does kind of skew the results a little bit, but on average, the median advertised salary for a clinical research coordinator is about $82,000. Which I thought was interesting because that was, obviously a little bit more than I would consider for an average salary for a clinical research coordinator. But with inflation and with the Great Resignation and people leaving and trying to be able to entice and bring people on, salaries have had to make adjustments as well. So there's that. And now I would love to, if David, if you are ready, I would love to kick it over to you to kind of talk a little bit about the workforce committee and what you guys have discussed, and if some of that falls in line with some of the data that I have presented, and if there's other thoughts and recommendations that, that y'all have talked about that you can share with us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And I appreciate data. It's always great to have data, and that's a Herculean effort to get that data. So thanks for putting that together. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we recognized a while back of this issue of the workforce challenges, especially as to sites, and we looked at people exiting the workforce, but then also some people call it Great Resignation. One site called it the Great Poaching, because a lot of them are going to industry, whether you're going to CROs or sponsors or to solution providers or in these new non-traditional roles that are newly created. So it's not just going to be a monitor, but it's going to be something different, as well as other people, hospital systems, the resignations affecting those, and people are, hey, I'm a coordinator, I'm an RN. Man, the hospital's got an attractive salary. They need nurses for NICUs and things along those lines. And so, they couldn't compete. The good news is that at least we're starting to see some softening on or some stabilization on the hospital side. My company is the largest out there. They just published our earnings report, and a lot of decrease in the instability or increase in stability in that profile, which is good. So hopefully that we'll get sucked into that tailwind. But yeah, we pulled together some of our large site networks that we know study these metrics early on, just to kind of get a feel for it. It's not rigorous scientific data, but mostly anecdotal data. But we see a general of about 2 to 3 times the turnover rate at the patient-facing level, mainly your CRC level. So 2 to 3 times what it was in the pre-pandemic arena. And then, of course, as you mentioned, increase in compensation, 40 to 60% is the range that's touted a lot of increase in compensation, not just base salary, but all the other benefits and retention bonuses and other things that they have to do to compensate those individuals. So we know that, you opened up this session with doing this together. And while we recognize that we have obligations as the society to say, hey, what can we do as sites to do this on our own without help or looking for help from sponsors, CROs, or whatnot, we got a lot of best practices from the sites that are managing this and share them in our toolkit to the sites. But then we also realized that we couldn't pull out of this together. And that was our open letter to our sponsor and CRO colleagues, which was, I understand, was very well received. It really opened up some eyes. And, we began that letter with a quote that I heard. I can't take credit for it. It was actually from a sponsor that said, when sites are suffering, my studies are suffering. And right now, sites are suffering with this workforce issues. We opened it, also took the tone of, we respect that sponsors and CROs are dealing with their own workforce issues as well, very similar to what we have, as well as the macroeconomic issues that are coming, the inflationary pressures and things along those lines. That's not just in the United States, but in many other countries as we talk to those other countries. And they get it. I presented a meme at a sponsor conference with basically a table of people, and they had Big Bird there. And the caption of it was, when the receptionist shows up to work to find out they're a coordinator today. Big Bird with deer in the headlights type eyes. And all the sponsors laughed. And then it says, yeah, but Big Bird's probably working on your study. The room got eerily quiet, and the hands started going up and say, what can we do as sponsors to help with this? So it sparked a lot of interesting discussions, because we are working on this together. There's things we can do as sites on our own, but then with our CRO colleagues. Immediate fixes on the site side. Some of the things that resonated with me was sites holding stay interviews. So not just a performance interview where you're going over your KPIs, but sit down with your employees. What is it that makes you want to stay working here? What obstacles do you have to staying working here? And what can we maybe do this? Maybe it's not more money. Maybe it's help with childcare or child transportation or other things. What can we flex to do some work from home if that's what's the obstacle there? If you're not recognized often, I know that the reward cycle in the younger generation workforce, they desire more recognition more often. So rather than big recognition later, smaller recognition more often. So many sites have invested in employee recognition software to help with those types of things. So those are some immediate fixes. I know on the sponsor side, they've talked about concepts like study continuity plans to say, hey, if we or our CRO is recruiting away the coordinator from the site, we know now, if we didn't know before, it takes 6 to 12 months for that site to get back on track with that study. And that's just bad data, bad quality, poor recruitment, if any recruitment during that time. So some sponsors have tooled around the aspect of, if we recruit away the site's coordinator, we need to have a study continuity plan with that site to negotiate it with that site, whether it's more money, taking away resources, whatever that is, to minimize the impact on the site for that study. So that's one thing I know that the sponsors and CROs are looking at. The other thing is the onboarding. So you can't have 1-to-7 ratio, as Nicole, as you put out there, for one applicant for 7 jobs. You also we can't have everybody requiring 2 years experience, because all we're going to do is rob from each other. We need new on-ramps into our industry. And I know organizations like ACRP that SCRS is partnering with to look at, how do we get past this 2-year requirement? How do we get new people onboarded? Because we have a phenomenal opportunity right now. I mean, for years prior to COVID, we all sat around going, gee, if only the whole world knew what we did. guess what? The whole world knows what we do now. Everybody was looking, everybody knows what clinical trials are, and everybody's looking to our industry. And this next generation of workforce, as I understand, they all want to work for social causes. They don't, it's not about the money or the big company or whatnot. Is what is you about? What social good are you doing? And what better social good than what we are doing and helping people live longer and healthier lives and making that happen faster. So we believe that we have a very good message to send to the next generation. We just need more challenges to onboard them. So we look for the skill sets of, do you have project management skill sets? Do you have other skill sets that maybe we can teach you the research tricks? I know my original mentor ages ago on this said, if you're trying to decide between two candidates, go outside and have them show you their trunk. And you want to pick the candidate, if the trunk's all messy, don't pick that one. Pick the one that has the trunk of their car, very organized and neat and that kind of thing. So we look for these skill sets and bring these people into these. I see a question on employee recognition software. I'm not familiar with it, but I think, search around for it. I think it's things, I know my company uses something, but it's more of, how long have you been here? Here's a token of thing. Here's an NFT of a token of longevity or things along those lines to recognize employees for longevity and other things. So, but that's the summary of it. So we're always looking for ideas. The online forum of SCRS is a great place for us sites to share the ideas that we have to help each other through this, because we can't do it alone. All we're going to do is rob from each other. And we continue to have dialogue, and we appreciate the sponsors and CROs that have come to us saying, how can we help? What can we do together on this? The last thing I want to close with is that, and Nicole, you can probably speak more to this than I can, because it's companies like Medix that bring this to our attention, is that there is a lot of fraud out there in applications and resumes. And we've seen a vast increase in this, especially at the CRO level. And I know we're a site organization, but we're not immune to this, of people putting CROs that have gone out of business, so there's no place to verify. Sites that have gone out of business, there's no place to verify their employment to get past this whole 2 years experience thing. Even down to the point of people doing interviews on Zoom for them, and the person that shows up for work isn't even the person that did the interview. So some companies have even put, when somebody says, oh, I'm interviewing, but my camera's broken right now, or my camera's malfunctioning, so leave the camera off. And the answer is no, we want to see you so that you're the same person that shows up to work that we interviewed. So just be very cautious about the amount of fraud out there for this, because it was happening prior to the pandemic and prior to this workforce issue. And I hear from staffing companies and CROs. I mean, CROs, they got the exact same CV from two different people, the same font, the same formatting, just copy paste the name on it. So it's on a rise, so be very cautious on it. So with that said, Nicole, I'll turn it back over to you to go ahead and facilitate the breakouts.
Yes. And it is something that we see, and it is helpful. I mean, staffing companies do a lot of vetting of employee people, but that they send over to companies before they even allow an interview. So I think it's, if you are using a staffing company, it does alleviate a little bit of the transition that you're talking about here. Sean, are you available to help with the breakouts?
Sure. So everybody, we're gonna actually, the team's calling an audible on me here, and we're going to stay together as a group for this conversation, because workforce is one of those things where I think we all have individual experiences, collective experiences, and maybe a handful of useful things that we've done over our careers to make a difference. One of the things that was, so for this segment, I noticed a whole lot of like bolded names coming at me right now on my screen. And this is one of those fun times where if you could turn on your camera, it's okay if you're on a beach, awesome. I'm going to automatically say you win, and it's totally cool. If you're walking, like sometimes I like to walk and talk, it's cool. Turn on that camera so we can see you. Let's have some fun. So I'm going to ask our sites out there. There was a lot of talk about helping folks that are naive to research come in and take a page out of the work you've been doing. What's been working for you now? What's been, do you have a success story you could share, just either in general about your employment program, or perhaps in approaching folks that don't have research experience? How have you brought them into your organization?
Really quick before someone answers, to try to keep this a little organized so we're not all talking over each other as well. It helps if you guys can use the raise your hand function. So at the
Sure.
bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says reactions and raise hand. That kind of kicks your name to the top. And then Sean, you can kind of work through those, and I'll help people lower their hands once they've had a chance to chime in. So if you have an answer to the question, right at the bottom under reactions is raise hand. I think you can also like click on yourself or something along those lines and raise your hand, but that'll be helpful as well. Well,
I think, okay, while we're, just to get you guys warmed up, because I know we're not wallflowers in this crew, that's for sure. I'm going to ask Hans Christian, because I see him at the bottom corner of my screen. Hans, tell us a little bit about what's worked for your team in terms of bringing new workforce in, and have you had any success outside of industry, folks that maybe just don't have a therapeutic background or are a little new to medicine?
Yes, thanks, Sean. I think it some really great input and some really interesting data that was presented there. And I think David also touched it, that we are overall looking at 3 different buckets, because we also have to look inside. How? Because many of the site owners and so, they are either getting a little less hair or get my color of hair. And there is a change management in the new generation. How David said that they want to be appreciated differently and so on. That's one piece. The other thing is, of course, bringing new people into the industry. And what worked for me, that was that I actually worked both with the nurse education centers, and also with the university for the project managers, because they can have different backgrounds and they don't necessarily have to be have a medical background. We were so fortunate that we had some that went into medicine with industrial specialization, so they don't get MDs, but they get some clinical background. And then we took them in and they did their master projects with us. So they actually got attached to us, and then we took them on board. And I mean, you know, a lot of those guys, and they are now in Novo and Lundbeck and Novartis and wherever they went on. And I think that's the other thing. I think it's important to try to, if you can in your area, you have somewhere where you have, I have seen in the US, you have so many different exciting educations that somehow is touching into healthcare somehow. Get in touch with these institutions, build up some, I mean, they have to do some projects along the line, take them out, let them do the project in your clinic, etc. And then in that way, you can grow them. I completely appreciate that means you don't get one with 3, 4, 5, or 20 years experience, but they learn the culture, you learn them. And we're also talking about staff turnover. And as sites, if we are not really big where you can make a real career plan, I mean, we are not seniors or something else where you can step around, or Pfizer. So we have to appreciate that we will have them for some years. Maybe some of them will come back again and take over if you open a new site and manage that site for you. But I always considered my study nurses, etc., project manager, that it's something as a small company, you have them on, you have them like your children, you don't have them forever, but I still keep in contact with most of them. And there I think there is a need to think a little different. That said, you also need to have people that stay longer. And so it is this mix that is very important, because staff turnover, I mean, if you look at what we had in China with 60% staff turnover, if you have 500 people, you can imagine HR is just on and offboarding all the time. It costs so much money. And as David also, I think, was pointing out, what it costs a site when the industry starts to cannibalize on your workforce to pull them out. I mean, they are actually shooting themselves in the foot if their study that's working on. So I think there is what I would really encourage, look at what kind of educational institutions are in your area. And then if you aren't working with them, start working with them and see, and at least you can get some people there. And when I see this, I mean, I was quite surprised when I saw these numbers 1 to 7, 1 to 35. I mean, we need to be creative.
We do.
So that would be my message here. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Hans. So I just want to just to encapsulate, this is something we scratched the surface. Like, I mean, we haven't even begun to dig into the idea of expanding clinical research awareness. I don't know if we've completely missed the boat. We were all clinging and surviving the last few years as we were called upon to do things perhaps that we've just never been, no one had ever done before. And I want to say that now is a good time. We're getting our feet back under us to revisit the idea of research as a profession into the schools. To prepare for today's call, I actually went to our local college here. We're near Baltimore, so we have the luxury of Hopkins, University of Maryland, and some other amazing academic institutions. But here locally, we've got a little Towson University, and they have they're building a $500 million healthcare college on campus. And what I noticed is Hans hit it on the head. He had a path for independent study for those students. So it gave them context into his work. And I'm curious, David, Nicole, and Jimmy, is as we bring this back into SCR, the greater community, is there a playbook that could be gleaned from working with our education institutions? I hear at Towson, to finish that story, we met with a networking group that was all alumni, and there wasn't really a clear path on how to reach students because there's sort of this transaction mechanism, like you have to spend money to go to their career fair, and then you got to have a program to onboard interns, and that's not really what we're talking about. I think we're talking about giving people a path that they want to jump into. So I'm just curious, is that something that maybe SCRS, that's something we could maybe bring into the fold at our next big GIP meeting? Everyone is talking about a playbook to work with our local education institutions, academic institutions.
I think so, Sean. I mean, it is a popular one. When you look at the toolkit that we put out, that was where our sites were sharing best practices. What Hans was saying of bringing in students to come in, it is very successful in this. They were even getting subcategories of it, like the medical residents are really not, but are that certain classes of students are seemingly better and convert to a CRC more than other kinds of students. And you can look at the white paper on that or reach out in the online community. But it's not just us. I mean, I know that other professional societies, ACRP, and I don't know, SOCRA as well, but they probably are doing something along those lines. So I think with a partnership within those, we can build a on-ramp to it. And it is a global problem. We talked about it in Australia last week about, gee, why isn't clinical research recognized as a profession? It's like, and they're campaigning to do that. And, every one of us, I'm sure, I'm a pharmacist, and then I tripped into clinical research, or I'm a nurse and I tripped into clinical research. We don't start out in that area. Some academic centers are doing this. They're offering bachelor's and master's in clinical research, which is good. But they still get that 2 year, you don't have 2 years experience. So I'm fresh out of college with a bachelor's degree in clinical research. I've studied everything I'm supposed to study, but then they're getting that block of, you don't have 2 years experience in that desire. So, like ACRP, I know is working on saying this isn't, if they have this experience, as academic experience, it's equivalent to 2 years experience. And organizations, I think Merck was one company that volunteered at the ACRP meeting of, we will take somebody with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in a health related field. And we have a training program to teach them the research tricks. And they've had some success with that so that they don't have to rob from their competitors or their CROs or the sites to fill those people.
I think a great idea too, David, would be to work with, to find a site, a spot that we should come together and say, let's try this and let's try it here and give a experiential start to finish to help people rinse and repeat. I mean, that's something that our sponsors and our CROs could then say to their sites, here's a program that's working. We want to help you with it. Here's something that, you could begin today. Here are the steps. I love that idea. I think it'd be fun to explore that with you guys. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask, we'll stay a little late. And if everybody who needs to jump, please, no worries whatsoever, but we'll stay a little late today. A question, and this may be a little controversial. It keeps coming up. We had a letter sort of embracing it. Like, look, you have an experienced clinical research site staff member and they leave for industry. When I first sort of heard this, my first reaction was, doesn't that happen everywhere in every industry where, people are looking to go and move up from a personal pay rate or some other caveat or benefit that they're looking for in the market? But there's very few industries where the ecosystem relies on each other for progress. I have a hard time even thinking of another one that would be a great example here on the fly. So I'm curious, is there ever, I hear the bad side of it, is there ever a good side of when a site staff member joins pharma, joins a CRO? I mean, is there any awareness to, hey, you've worked with us before, where you came from, here's where the work needs to go, can you help us get there even faster? I mean, is there any sort of legacy benefit that could be gleaned from that so that the site doesn't have to suffer in sort of that vacuum of talent? I don't know if I'm articulating that quite very well, but I think Maria Elena, looks like you're picking up what I'm trying to put down.
Yeah, I do want to say that we've had, so I'm a hospital network site that has lost a lot of people to pharma or to vendors. And to be quite honest, there's been absolutely no return on that investment. So we take a coordinator who is a phlebotomist, we turn him into a research coordinator, he gets ACRP certified, he decides he's going to go work for another company. And so there's been no return. And this has not happened once. This has happened since before COVID. I had to turn over almost entire staff twice. And it's not necessarily because they don't like the job. They're looking for a little bit of growth that maybe we can't offer in a hospital network, or they're looking for salary. A lot of times it's salary that I don't have the kind of flexibility with salary that they do. And then again, I'm a patient-facing department, so I can't offer 100% remote position. So it's really hard to compete with that. So when we do have coordinators that leave for pharma and they say, oh, don't worry, we'll find studies, we're going to stay together because we really like, I liked working here and you gave me all these skills. I've got none of that, even all the way up to an associate director who went and now works for a very large pharma company as she actually, I'm not sure her title, but she manages multiple studies in therapeutic areas that we have. And has been zero. So I can't say that there's any positive about it. I feel like we just can't compete. And so if we can't compete, what are other ways that we can get the work done that we need to do? And I think we also need to, in addition to doing education to teach people that clinical research is a track, because they're always going to be leaving, we need to figure out better ways to keep them to staying here. I mean, I work in a hospital network because I want to be with the patients. And I want to see those people. And I think that might be a missing piece.
Thanks, Maria Elena. I would say that there's two pieces here. One is, how do you compete? Do you need to compete? Do we need to set some measures of success when people stay with the site? There's usually high expectation and high turnover in the industry counterparts. You don't see a whole lot of folks. I don't meet a lot of folks that have been, with a sponsor CRO solution provider, with 10 years on or anything like that. I mean, some might be on the call, but I do meet a lot of sites personnel that have made a career in a place that they call home for whatever reason that might be. And it's certainly not salary driven. It could be other intangible benefits. I'm wondering if there's a conversation to be had there where you guys could have some measure just to share, hey, these are the paths and the different industry players. But then there's also the collaboration side of that. So I wonder if there's just, the same way that David mentioned the exit interview. I wonder when there's an onboarding interview and you're helping that new employee that came from a site. Like, what are some of the things that you need to be aware of, sponsors and CROs, that could be hurting the study, or that site does differently, or could bring into the fold? Is there another path for that relationship to take hold of? In other markets that we've worked in, just with our association backgrounds, outsourcing is a very popular situation. And a lot of times when you hire from within, that is actually a huge benefit for both organizations. But I know that it's just the way we rely on each other, and the ecosystem is a little different. I know we have a few more minutes, but I saw Maria's hand up, and I'm sorry if I talked over your question. I just wanted to touch base on that. Oh, you're on. We can't hear you. I think she said yes to everything you were saying. Yes. Oh, there you go. Okay, you're back
there
on.
we go. Sorry about that, having technical difficulties. Yeah, I just wanted to second what Maria was saying. I think that that's something that is a consensus, that many times we onboard someone, and whether they have experience or not, especially we obviously prefer people that come from experience. It takes a lot of time to train them, even from our own systems like EMR or CTMS system, just our in addition to research itself. And so I think the biggest problem is that many of these folks are driven and they're looking for expanding their career in a bigger and greater setting. And so it's kind of like a milestone. So that's one issue. And the other issue is that we see across every field is lack of opportunities for growth. Because if you're in that position, then you're going to be acquiring those skills to move to the next move, right? Something that fits more of your career and life and work balance. And so I think that there definitely needs to be some insight in how to better train our employees, and also to help with prevention of retention strategies. But at the same time, especially with the rate of inflation, also a look into a bigger salary, because they do a lot of work. And in fact, many of the coordinators that we have interviewed for the position, they are doing some tremendous amount of work that needs more value. And so definitely, if we're looking for those, we need to find a way to keep them.
Thanks, Maria. I appreciate your experience and sharing that with us. One last question here from Tracy, and then we'll wrap it up.
It's more of like a
Good point.
comment than a
Yeah.
question. When you talked earlier about what successes you've had, and we've tied up before COVID with nursing schools, it hasn't really solidified. They didn't have the skills and they were wanting to move on. But the issue I have as a site director, the last two coordinators that left had been here for 9 years each. But the reason that they left to be monitors was because of salary, exponentially large salary. One nurse was 60 years old and she's like, I only have so many more years left. and I really need this salary. But then as a site, as we all know, we're stuck with the budgets that we've had from these sponsors before. And I still find an extremely rigid lack of increased budgets, even when you try your darndest in every way you can with all these discussions like we had today. And she's like, I need to make the, the most money I can in the next couple of years before I retire. And it's still something that we can't compete with. And I've had ads in Indeed and ZipRecruiter for the last 2 months, and I've had like one interview. So it's there's really just like the statistics we had before. And I have tried to hire, sometimes you can hire people that are non-medical, but when you have protocols that are extremely high acuity, it's very difficult to have those low-level people, even to do data entry, because they just don't have the knowledge base to know what this medication is and this disease is, and even to data enter, so it's just a very rough area from a site level. And I hired, my last hire was a master's degree individual that was non-medical, but I couldn't find enough for her to do, because what we needed was science-based and what she offered. So I found that she was becoming more of an administrative individual, and that didn't help with her degree whatsoever. I could have had a entry-level person instead of a master's degree person, because we were trying to even have her do EKGs and things, what I mean? Which is, but some people do work, like in recruiting. We've had people that had no medical experience that, based on their level of excitement and initiative, worked out well, and they stayed with us for years. But that's just not really the climate for us right now. And I don't know if it's Florida. It's obviously not Florida. We saw the statistics. So I just have to figure out a way to grapple out of it. One of the situations we had is one of our big Pfizer vaccine studies. They provided a 3-wire individual to be here. So she probably makes 3 times the amount of money of everybody else. And she's an agency person, and she's here to help us with that particular study. So they would rather not increase our budget, but yet have a temp person that they brought in for us as well. But it shoots us all in the foot, because that doesn't help us in the long run.
I think we need to identify some of these scenarios and raise the awareness too, Tracy. You bring up a great point. It's just we're capturing today. It may seem like anecdotal until it happens over and over and over again at everywhere on the planet. And I think it's part of our work to begin to share that story a little bit and bring changes and challenge the paradigm a bit. We'll talk about that more at the Global Summit for certain.
Great.
I have to bring today's event to a close, so my colleagues can move on to their calls that I've already made them late for. So I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Nicole. Thank you to David. Thanks for everyone for tuning into today's Sites Now. We are talking again in September. We'll be talking about great ideas to move site success forward. We'll be featuring a lot of our big speakers from the Global Summit, and look forward to hosting you then. So from my team to yours, have a great rest of the week. Thanks very much for tuning in on this important topic, and we look forward to making progress soon.